So some people say that the Rupakaya of the Buddha is not Buddha, but this is not really what I'm trying to say here, that the Rupakaya of the Buddha is not Buddha.
以下的用字是不对的，但用以下的这种用字呢，可以增进理解，所以就用这种以下不对的用字。那所谓的以下不对的用字包括到什么呢？在上次上课的时候有说，真正的佛是法身。那这种话里面呢，会让我们以为是对不起，真正的佛是法性。那这个话会让我们误解为什么？就是那变成色身不是真正的佛了。那这个色身它当然也是真正的佛，但虽然有人主张色身不是真正的佛，但要注意到上次我们的有些用词上面，它其实是不对的字，但是可以增进理解所用。
대기 즉我们就真说呀，但是在头个讲写的那样，我们都真的下一单写我开始，就是大开始那个那些，那个米大把印证一定米中往这来对，头些他都往都真的连讲是吧？但第谈究的这个咖啡。다 가병에 당하는 게 이거 샤와 다 같이 아니 군저 탐지 류 취재를 했을 근데 나 산지 수고대 류 취재를 해서 계제디 시행이 가서 지시 잡잡여 그봐 잡여 다 양조양 띠를 때세로 담아이나 근데 나 초사래 다 이내 코디 도시 동론자마도 오늘 레벨라空지 개숑다 같이 숑체도지 공지샤 단위인지네 아니 리뷰도 제는 딘디메나 딘부 요마레 다인 도롱그 주도 레라 니티 팅기도 딘데기 아니 산지기 수구다 남제다 뒤지기 꾸여와 디게디 미다버레스는 미다버레 미다버 샤고르 규로도고 다워나 아니 루이체르베스 라운데 아니 타르도고 원도 제니다 루이체르스는 가장 제시자에디 대코나이 시몰 디탐지 요마레 디게디 두제시는 나와 잠레스 제선 루이치 제시디 자로와 다 양조스 나탄치를 제나메나 디 따바 마레 이네 따베 리수네바 시딘지 비지 제쇼사레스는 고와지 리거 이네 디 라바랑이 쿵통요 마레 슝 단이디 비지 제기 아니 제선 친주 제레 다 리수네바 라고에 가르레스는 딘디기 수구당 디샤데 디 탐제로 자와 시디 거기 셔서기 시디 주인들도 돈이디 딜라난다 아니 동만이 숙소라는 최탐제 시 돈이네出现려라 왔을라나 미다와디 가리르스는 돈이네 인규모 동만이 임버지 넘버 구즈비치던데 나와도 레디 이네 신다디기 샤레디 딘디 모디 마신비 토르 샤데 요지
마신비
집제지기 토네 인샤데 조지 단다 산지기 수구샤레디 산지기 두지고 되게 디샤르용에디 돈이 디샤르와 마세 돈이 신비 토네 신비 왕기 라 로디 돈이를 뭐 예르메도 송이 디시 토네 샤데 요인데 타베리스네발라네 고주지 요댕이 다디다 지고 지장진이 수구다 남친 되게디 군조 대바레베스는 군조 대바레 어느 가르레스는 근데 데비리스네발레스 가르레스는 시아스에 있다기도 지고지경 렌디 돈데 데버 디히의 샤비 토네 디히비 토네 셈디 데르 슈비 토네 아니 뭐디 넘버 파 샤용해지 다 디인디잖아요 가리차르르스는 코란 랑기 원도 따는 계제시나 따바 임베서로 돈데 데마 임베서로 이네 두제기 농수기 토네 계제시 용도잖아요 아니 미다바 인딩에 아니 군저 데바 인딩에 안 사버도 다 두제는 수용도 되나 아니 상기 중요해요래 상기 안 로치를 줘야요래 안 줘야요래 뭐 코로나란 경우도 지내시는 상기 공로 가서래 로신신리베 개발베 난다 라투에메 가르세는 두제 가시도 신신한 거래 가시도 로숨 주스는 거래 가시도 너 주스는 거래 가시도 기본한 거래 가시도 종사주는 거래 가시도 중교는 거래 딜레도 다 가르래 생각은 신기지 시에미도 제자다 두지문의 시에는 기제지 시에 유예된 안타다가 스트레스.
So actually there was an explanation that is quite difficult and quite high that I wasn't going to give because it's not good to give such high explanations, but now I have to give it. I have to give this explanation now because there's no way around it. So if you may remember yesterday, we talked about that which is impermanent is not reliable. Or we previously spoke about this idea that something is impermanent is not reliable as it's explained in the lower systems. Now, talking about it from the point of view of the Prasangika school, well, we speak about impermanent, we speak about conventional truth as being deceptive. So conceptual truth being conceptive. So phenomena, so if this is not, this may not be very clear here, but this idea that phenomena are merely deceptive. So saying that, therefore, for example, in reality, when we talk about phenomena being imputed, phenomena, so this is something not really, I'm just saying this because of course we have to look at the text, we have to look at the scriptures here. What kind of scriptures set this forth? What exactly are the scriptures saying about this? What is the kind of reasoning? So it's difficult to be very decisive about this here, but we can say this, we can talk about this here in the sense, for the sake of bringing up different ideas and different doubts, different kind of debates, we can talk about it in this way. So Geshe-la was saying that when we talk about the Rupakaya, when we talk about the omniscient mind of a Buddha, the Rupakaya, the impermanent qualities of a Buddha, they are impermanent, they are changing, they are momentary, they change moment by moment. So according to the Prasangika school, they are deceptive phenomena. They are deceptive phenomena which is illustrated by the fact that from the perspective of an omniscient consciousness that perceives emptiness, they do not appear. But and from another perspective, we could talk of those here, the Rupakaya of a Buddha, any kind of impermanent quality of a Buddha, that we cannot really say that they are permanent, but we could speak of them as being of a type of impermanence, abiding in the type of permanence. So there's a difference here, not saying that they're actually permanent, but being of a type, of abiding in a type of permanence. So this kind of abiding in a type of, what does that actually mean? That the actual basis, the root basis of these qualities of the Buddha is Dhammaka, or is the sphere of emptiness, is emptiness itself. So the kind of basis for them is emptiness, which is why it says in the Heart Sutra, emptiness is form. So from within this emptiness, phenomena appear. In fact, all phenomena appear from within emptiness, being in the nature of emptiness. It's just that we don't know that, we're not aware of that. So phenomena exist, though they exist out of emptiness, or they're possible, or they're based on emptiness, but we're not aware of it. But when we speak of the Rupakaya of the body, the Rupakaya of the Buddha, so talking about the impermanent qualities of the Buddha, such as the Rupakaya of the Buddha, the Rupakayas of the Buddha arise because out of an understanding of emptiness. So they understand out of an understanding of emptiness, which is therefore, that's why we're saying here, they're actually abiding as being of a type of permanence. Another way of expressing the impermanent qualities of the Buddha, such as the omniscient consciousness and the Rupakaya, is that they're conventional truth, but they abide as a type of ultimate truth. They abide as a type of ultimate truth because they arise from having dissolved into emptiness, from having realized emptiness. So therefore, out of the nature of the realization of emptiness, out of that they arise. So in this sense here, it means the same thing. The reasoning here for why we talk about it as being as abiding of a type of permanence, or as abiding as a type of an ultimate truth, is that it's risen from an understanding of emptiness. But from the perspective of sentient being, it is just a mere appearance. It is just dependent on the appearance of sentient beings. So from the perspective of sentient beings, then these Rupakaya, these emanations appear differently. So for some, therefore there's the appearance of change, so that the Buddha's emanations get older, they grow older and older. For some, the Buddha who appears as old to the same person or to another person, the Buddha may appear as young, as like being 30 years old or 50 years old. To some beings, the emanations of the Buddha may appear as dying or just taking birth. So this is from the side of the disciples. This comes from the side of the example, from the perspective of the disciples. The way they appear to them has to do with the perspective of disciples. But nonetheless, and as Joshua said earlier, nonetheless we can talk of them as having arisen from the realization of emptiness.
他本人到底现在是生还是老还是死呢？我们回答是，这是没有办法讲的，因为呢，观待着不同的所化机，那有的所化机会看到佛现在在出生，有看到佛正在讲法，有的看到佛在老，等等等等。所以呢，观待佛本人来讲，无所谓生老死可言，那只能够呢，从不同的所化机的显现面上，才能够说佛的生的现在是生还是老还是死等等。
chetal thungye nyanga yore se geje di ledang di to ne geje shewa yinani dila da mata gi chule chibar ke yomar ine nga zulo la tuja di ani yom rashin gi yomare la du ani me basam lo khorne dita tige du samba yorba jena ta yaga di ani rashin yomare la du mebe chula tön ro jena su simgi des mi su ji yongro jena ngi charji sam dai to be ta sam sam ko gu de ta 근데 가시지 섬다 저렇게 민도 근데 저를 뭐지 야부 쉬우요를 튕겨래 자심 쉬우를 튕겨래 말한게 tem버서마도 저를 뭐지 코랑이 뭐네 자심 말에 인데 요 말이라 대부분도 시나리스도 그래서 뒤다고 요시와 차대고 신문이 내세도 다 맞다를 키요 말 영원히 매나 매번 차도나니 다발람네 제다를 마다발람네 제다를 Rangwani maybe doing masonaji. Tobe doesn't yine meba mayimbo yuecho but gijishena, Tawale Chidalumari, Matavale Chidalumaro.
So here with regard to going to the extreme of nihilism here, well, with regard to being imputed or not imputed here, so here it seems to come down to not being able to differentiate between the two, or perceiving that which does not exist inherently, perceiving that as not existing at all. So this is kind of where, with regard to positive things or with regard to negative things, there shouldn't be any difference that one understands that something is imputed, merely imputed, then it cannot exist from its own side. So one really only falls into the extreme of nihilism when one is not able to differentiate. In other words, when one perceives the lack of inherent existence referring to actual non-existence. So here I've actually tried to test it on myself, my own personal understanding with regard to phenomena being merely imputed. So I thought about this and tried to find out, thinking so phenomena are just imputed by conceptual consciousness. And there was not a specific feeling that arose right away upon thinking of different phenomena. And then I took His Holiness. I took His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I was thinking that the greatness of His Holiness, the amazing qualities of His Holiness, so thinking that those are just imputed by my conceptual consciousness, and suddenly it made me feel really uncomfortable. No, this cannot be. That these qualities are just coming from my own mind. There's just something that I conceptually perceive. So it became scary to think that these qualities just came from my own mind. So thus, when we fall into the extreme of nihilism, that is because we're unable to differentiate between not existing from its own side and mere non-existence. If we can feel comfortable that it is okay for something to exist if it is merely imputed, that something can exist, it is possible for it to exist, because it is merely imputed, then we will not fall into such an extreme of nihilism. So this understanding needs to be developed.
当你想它不是由自方成立的时候呢，也不会因此而有落入断尽的危险。
就像三节节，你书堂就是书名称大上面的名单大上面的送比切了，那么他们这边一些地方名称的大上面的是，那么他们这边一些的特别区信息源呢，这样名称的大上面的是。
So understanding that, therefore, the Buddha's body is merely imputed by name and terminology. The Buddha's omniscient consciousness is merely imputed independence of name and terminology. And if there was something even greater than the omniscient mind of a Buddha, then that would also be merely imputed independence on name and terminology.
Sanji ji ku lai me chara damewa Sanji ji sugu minza dazam le lai timare chikang sukso sukso minza dazam mata vishe digi di sung tene namjiye minza dazam res tida chikwa chikang
Sorry, just noticed my mistake. He said, did you say form or did you say form body? I said form body. He said, no. The Buddha has all forms. So with regard to forms in general, so if they are merely imputed independence on name and form, then we can say also with respect to the omniscient consciousness of the Buddha, that is merely imputed independence on name and terminology. And if that is merely imputed, then even if there's something greater than that. So basically even something greater than the omniscient mind would be merely imputed.
Chirtobe dasamse labordo de kazange gozuti ne lai ngo chunangzamse tanye de bijije she yongde zane tati tikimi du la nge ta ni trobono la yongde go chiza shinju che chi de she wa yin se
So also what I discussed, what I mentioned before, that saying because phenomena are merely imputed, therefore they're merely mistaken appearances, well, even some of my friends don't agree with this. So there's this discussion with regard to being mere appearances, being mere mistaken appearances, or if something is merely imputed, whether that means that phenomena are mere mistaken appearances. That discussion does take place, and for the sake of that, I've said it here, so that this should be discussed.
Labordo gyugi dimo de kichi wa ina ta chunangzam la du senzendegi chi yora sheba la nangzam la yechi wadi so de bo chigba chin samlo khorwa ina ane kamye de yogure ta gyugi de be kansa shin ta le ne sangi jangjang ge jamare kansa shin ta nang de ding la nangzam ina ingi sheba de dani chi cha na hai gyu ta de ba me ba cha du do sin senzem ba ki chi she de ta yogure ma to ta senzem ba de mi dawa chin sheba ina chidin yuebe toni minzam dazi asa chunangzam che ine chidin yuebe wa dindigi toni sheba ina ani di gangi di pechi yungma di tingda gyuchi go chadu wudu siyayi dina da sanje di simjin chunangzam ina simjin gyuchi di go chadu wudu si diwa di pechi yungma
So here, with respect to other kind of difficulties, so if something is merely imputed, the idea that therefore it is included in one's own mental continuum. If phenomena are mere mistaken appearances, does that mean phenomena are included in one's own mental continuum? So in the way that the Chittamatra, for example, would explain it, that phenomena are merely appearing to awareness. So there the problem would arise that, leave aside a Buddha, even phenomena just such as if they exist in another person's continuum, if they appear merely to my consciousness, then does that mean the phenomenon, like the body of another person, exists in my own mental continuum, and is not the continuum, but is not the body of another person? So that difficulty arises when one holds the Chittamatra school, the Chittamatra view, or the view of the mind-only school, because there is accepting or asserting that there is no external existence. But here there is the existence of external phenomena. So therefore, even though phenomena are mere mistaken appearances, since there is external existence, there is not the danger that one may think that if something appears to my mistaken awareness, that therefore it is part of my own mental continuum. So that danger is not there because there is the acceptance of external phenomena. So it should not follow in the same way as it would follow if one reasons or if one thinks according to the Chittamatra.
아니 단다디 계속 미숨 여바체 아니 디돌라 먹지게 미숨 나홀라 미지기春차 외진치야기 낙차요레 딘두 단다디 먹디 오늘 전화 장고레 이냥 미디 마볼 되게 통성 아니 미생박이 양미기 꾼 외바체 아니 먹디기 순차 양미 자와 디지통 이제 양미 탕탕 외바체 아니 강젠디 먹디 운에디 통로와 다나 미숨 이 강통 배 먹디 상계 차상 통비 요리데 하바도 순차 야버지 토마토 개디 이 순차 강토마디 상계 다그랑 된제 통비 요리데 기지 유나 아니 상계기 록세양 록세랑 낭배 나와디 상계양 다그랑 된제 낭기 요리데 이치와 하고 디 미나 랭낭 차네 아니 디슈고 다루
So here the question that has been asked concerns other induced appearances. So let's say there are 3 different types of persons. So 3 different people looking at a cup. And then there's also the Buddha himself. So you have 3 different people. One person, the first person, has some kind of fold in their eye and therefore misperceives the color of this green cup. Let's say, for example, the cup was green, would perceive this cup as being red. The second person also has a fold in the eye and also perceives the cup as different as it actually exists in reality. Again, misperceives the color. And only the third person has no fold. There's no fold in their perception, so there's no physical fold with regard to their eyes, and so therefore they perceive the color, the actual color of the cup. So now does the Buddha actually, does to the Buddha's consciousness appear what to each of those 3 people appear? Does also the appearance to a wrong consciousness of these 3 people, of one of those, or of these 2 people, does also that appear? So does the Buddha see whatever what the 3 types of awarenesses with regard to this cup, is the Buddha aware of those? Are there 3 cups?
The near the Chandra Jay, the civil Latumina. Caressina Susudola, now the edit the Sangi Tonguri. Now I'm Mita Sumiro. Now I'm Mita Sum Sangi Tonguri, that did the shape of watch it and
So first with regard to the color here, Sukhi says I'm not able to with regard to that to give a clear answer. But in particular, I mean, with respect to the 3 different types of appearances, through these 3 different people, so having 3 different appearances, they are clear to the Buddha. So the Buddha realizes what appears to each of one of those 3 people. So this we don't need to speak about, that is pretty clear.
Any now assume the tongue. In Misundiki Mida Tonga. The Sanjiki Tegarsina Tegars Lansibichita in Bangi, Shenangi Janevachi, Tegarsibaina and Karisiris, Ben Michi til Sebuton, Chigmabuton, Nye Tegartabaina, Mubutomu, Dirwa. Chesanta Sanjiki Tegarsina, Karisirisina, Sigma, Dirita. Tegar. Shenji the now you go to see one to Sanji Taylor Kunzu Chis ye Yomar.
So with regard to the 3 appearances, so they are seen, they are perceived by the Buddha. The Buddha knows what individually appears to each of those 3 people. But when we talk about a straightforward appearance, in other words, a personal appearance, which means not appearing, so what does appear to the Buddha without appearing to any of these 3 people? So let's say Geshe-la pointed at the iPad in front of him, which has a blue cover. So for one person this appears as yellow, to another person this appears as red, and it appears to me as blue. So what does the Buddha, what appears to the Buddha himself as personally? And the Buddha says there's no other personal appearance, there's nothing further that appears to the Buddha other than that which appears to those 3 people. So in other words, there is no straightforward appearance. It is by way of appearing to another person, these colors, whatever appears to these other persons, that's what appears to the Buddha.
Yes. Sanjay Tegasi on the Momo Sigyo Made, in Momo Tondi made the truth. Momo Toyed. Momo Toyed. Truth. There's a Sanjay CDC Mido. Sanjay Tegasi CDC Mido. Tayan Sanjay Yang meet the Kensho Guru, the name is Kavarva. The men that Sanjay Tegar, Timotamji Devita, Lodi, 테버시디 시기어 말에 네 통디 통화 추르.
So the Buddha not seeing this phenomenon straightforwardly, well, therefore, what appears to me, seeing this object as blue, I'm mistaken. So by reason of the fact there is blue, but I'm saying that by reason of the fact that the Buddha, that this does not appear straightforwardly, that this does not appear by way of a personal appearance, therefore the Buddha, to him it doesn't appear by way of having eliminated the stains, therefore it appears, I'm mistaken with regard to this object.
진짜 산제의 이치대스 유인링이 지금 기지시나 니삼당도 편도 용구로. 제산다 미 스스로 뇌제 등인데는 미틸 두가면도 삼수 독자 쇼지 통고되대. 이 산지 두시디 독자 요말. 테더시디 독자 요말. 테더 계자 마시베네. 전주 셈바드 주기다 테더시나. 전주 셈비 주기다 마다 마시 빌로디 테더시나. 매번 말해대 이내 야부 쉬어요. 세상 맞추래. 미투자 쉬우도나 맞추래.
So, in order to generate those who have some faith in the Buddha, that may beneficial. Saying that if I, for example, perceive a person as like the worst person in the world, so from the point of view, if I see this person as like the worst person possible, from the Buddha's point of view, with regard to the straightforward perception, kind of straightforward or directly perceiving, the Buddha doesn't perceive this person as bad. From the point of view of the Bodhisattva, looking at that same person, so without investigating, without analyzing the ultimate, so the mind that does not investigate in such a way, they would see this person as really positive, as someone very positive and very good. So this means that it doesn't appear to the Buddha straightforwardly, that means that I'm mistaken. Since it doesn't appear straightforwardly to the Buddha, I'm mistaken.
기자마시바제 지댕기 원도 따네 다 지댕기 대바다 지댕기 원도 집이 대바다 로바 딘디기 타니기 원도 지네 기지시 용디 다 가도들 되게 나가는 데스 따다지 라투고민도데 아니 베나다 짜자고 메버데 비짜디 지라 아니 미리지기 디지디 투디 차고마 다바기 제다지기 괜찮 되게 차비리 저리 용고마 리지기 차비리 저 용고 대 내가서 다 갈라버려 거의 차시에야 리자 차위 리자 지다 자지기 차시에다 차위 리자다 차위 리자 니요레 했으니 다 딘디시 제니제 용거.
So talking from a worldly kind of point of view, so from the point of view of truly existing or being mistaken, so being right, being correct or incorrect, so using these words of being correct or something being true or being wrong, so using this terminology here, with colors, with regard to colors, I'm not really sure here. But with respect to, for example, let's say you have an iron rod, a hot burning iron rod. So if you touch this hot burning iron rod, for some people, when they touch it, they perceive it as hot. Whereas there are other people who do not perceive it as hot. They touch it and there's no experience of being hot. So therefore, at that time, we would have to say that together with this burning iron rod, there is the feeling of heat and there's the feeling of coldness. So it gives rise to both of those. So we would say that, or one would say then, therefore, that both those exist independent on that iron rod.
야 차시 기자마시 바체 아니 딘디 라바데 레온데 리자지 베나 차 차보디라 아니 다 차보 정문 용인기다 딘디 용투베기 니바 예딩이 라바데 두스 차려온데 리자 장무지 설득해 바치 디긴진 자디 딩도 리자 장무지 설득해 바 딘디 디시제 용으로.
Likewise, with regard to this experience of heat, now if there's an experience of heat when touching this iron rod, then after some time, someone newly arrives, or there's a person who now newly perceives this iron rod. So if they have no perception of heat upon touching something that we would say is hot, if they have an experience of cold, then we would have to say that in that moment there is a coldness newly established on the basis of this iron rod, because someone has that new experiences of cold, so therefore there's a new kind of quality of cold that is newly established on the basis of that iron rod.
다시 통만이 비친시 가장 이모기지 중으로 한테만 지혜되게 지금 스트레스 내다오지 거고도 유연한 나로지 난지 중으로 중요한 다시 통만이 봐 하면 이다 숨이 지저도 따위세 나야죠와 제가 배디 고교 차기도 하는 건 솔로 용다기 지 근데 다시 통만이 배지 중만 나로지 스케치티 라긴 중마중래 중래 제가 라긴 중요한
So Gisela's asking with regard to a kind of common, uncommon kind of perception of something. So an uncommon perception, we've discussed this point earlier on with regard to a vessel with liquid, with the liquid that three types of people perceive it differently. So a person of the human realm perceives it as water, a person of the Preta realm perceives the same vessel with the liquid as some blood, and so forth. So Gisela asked at that time, can you come up with an example where one object is being perceived, but different people perceive it in a different way? So did anyone respond? And we said no one actually came up with an example. Gisela asked for an example, an easier kind of example, a worldly kind of example, where three different people, for example, look at the same object but have three different perceptions.
남배기 계제시에는 신체의나다 카도도 샤네 디고 그래서는 배게 레디기 카도 레마르보이나 마르보디 레디기 모치 버기시에요. 딜레디 전에 모치 버기시에서도 다단다디 미긴디바 마당에 카도 통이 dimne 딩이 주다디 배게 딱가보나 보지 차대요. 딜레디 딱가보나 보디 모네디레 마부토에도 모네디스나 아니 코티고 다니시 리고로. 이는 제리기 된저나 시기메 비서로지 말에 카도도 코도 모치 디시기 메나 제가 디시기 메인디 디페디야 펜타오메다. 딜레도 일단 빼야 보지 고도 나간도.
So Gisela is saying from a Buddhist point of view, when we talk about color, let's say for example, in Gisela was pointing at like a red, talking about like a red tablecloth, for example. So the redness of the tablecloth exists as of being one nature, is explained to be of being one nature with the tablecloth. And then for a person who has no problem with their eyes, whose eyes are not impaired, they would be able to see the red color of this tablecloth. However, a person who may be colorblind, they perceive this color of the tablecloth, perceive that to be whitish or grayish in color. So here, from the point of view of a scientific kind of understanding, it is very difficult because they don't really say that the color is of one nature with the tablecloth. It's rather the idea that it's rays of light, that color refers to light. So therefore, this becomes a little difficult from a Buddhist point of view to use this as an example, which is why we need a better example. We need a better example of something that appears differently to three different types of people having the same basis. Anyone? The second question.
이바디 다기미 숨디 나무 알지 디 모비 통찬에 아니 쌤 나머지 전송 디 묘망의 통용배 봉바디 말에 디 값소 관계 쌤 나무라 묘망 통용배 봉바디 돌지 샤요래 갑티 상기기 관계 쌤 나무라 샤비 돌지 다가랑 돌지 통요래
통요래
自己决定。
光你刚刚说大节前几个月，光你刚刚说大节前，那个这句囤积的통기有嘞，상기기，光你显năng的
显năng有嘞，对咯。
你们同样没什么了，同样没什么了。
可到我的车底的，到先地了，他就可到我的车底的，那上几个你听有嘞。시고르베
시기요르베
모든 미시디기 제소탕도 떡과 내가 그 남바샤에 먹기 때문에
말
유마 봉바시 맞지 디 유마의 통용배 봉바디 말이 이게 생활이 전용도 유마 통용배 봉바디 던지지 샤요
다 감지 지와디 분비 등지 샤야 되게 마도 단다디 통마 통디 지와다 카도 되어요 말로 다가를 된다 또 거를 샤디에 디산지 시기도 했어
So here in the second part of the question asked here is that with Rikamachi there's three people. So one of those three people who sees the cup correctly, so they may then, this person is then thinking, so first is the eye consciousness perceiving the cup, and then there's the thought, this is not the same cup that I perceived before. So therefore, to their conceptual consciousness, a mental image or a generic image of the cup, of an earlier cup, appears. That mental image, that generic image of the earlier cup, is that perceived by the Buddha? So this appearance, of course, appears to the Buddha. So it has appeared to the Buddha, but it's an other-induced appearance. It is not a personal appearance to the Buddha. In other words, it does not appear straightforwardly. It does not appear straightforwardly. So only if it didn't appear, if there wasn't such an appearance, then it would not appear to the Buddha. If there's an appearance, it has to go to the
Buddha. Pashani, any kalabore, chinjulo true. Tapena Tongdi Sevori Shas now Yora, Michelle now Yore, Tobage, Temper Yore teaches. Did it now at the Yoba Insa, now at the Yorwa. Don't save the men, don't save now at the Yorwa, and now at the Sanji Silva.
So this is not just true for the cup or for the vase here. So even with phenomena that do not exist, for example, in the case of a white conch shell, if it appears to an eye consciousness as being yellow, then this eye consciousness to which a yellow conch shell appears, it induces a conceptual consciousness to which also a yellow conch shell appears. So the appearance is the appearance of the yellow conch shell exists, that also is perceived. These appearances are also perceived by the Buddha.
Then do you want to say you don't do you know? That was taught to me. You're Tindiki taught to me the Sanji Musum the Channel. Tindiki taught to me the Sanji Musum the Chingiro. Just a Musum the Chendi, and in Kisi di Shanang Maina, Nishiba the Navi Kone, now we catch the Mashi with on the Tiger, and in Musum the Chamber in Sanji to Menu in Gavan later.
So with respect to, for example, a disease or a sickness or a pain that I experience, if I have pain somewhere, then this pain, this suffering that arises in my continuum, well, the Buddha, this experience, that experience of suffering, that experience of pain, is realized by the Buddha, is perceived or understood by the Buddha. It is directly realized by the Buddha. There's a direct realization of the suffering, of the appearance of that suffering. But not straightforwardly. If the Buddha were to experience that pain straightforwardly, it would follow that the Buddha himself suffered. So it's only what appears, it's by way of appearing to me, it appears to the Buddha, it is perceived by the Buddha. If it were to directly appear to the Buddha, in other words, straightforwardly, then the Buddha would absurdly experience suffering.
상계기 신난기 통내 차창로 하고 도미래. 네.
지산다 티초소. 나와네 나비 목세 키버 쳐버려. 나와디 열와. 동세고 나와디 열와. 동세고 하고다. 집은 뒤전에 동디 세고 동으로 슈고디 세고 동으로. 지산 슈고 세고 여마로. 슈고 세고 상기 통해 여마. 세고 여마로 세고 나와디 여로 통거 나와서 하고도 통화를 다 페이지 통화디 여로 통구도 진짜 통화디 산지 통거를 했어 다 세고 통거를 위해서는 산지 슈고 세고 통거를 위해서는 통마 다디 슈고 세고를 매봐
So here, the Chinese translator asks, so in short, does that mean whether what appears to sentient beings, eye consciousness or conceptual consciousnesses, so whatever object that appears, is that known by the Buddha? And here the Buddha again says, so here you got confused about the terminology. There's a difference between saying whichever object that appears or the appearance of an object. Because the object that appears doesn't necessarily exist. So Geshe-la took the example of a white piece of paper. If that white piece of paper appears as yellow, now a yellow paper does not appear to the Buddha because it doesn't exist. So the appearance of the yellow paper, that appears to the Buddha. Because if a yellow paper were to appear to the Buddha, it would exist. But a yellow paper doesn't appear. So it is the appearance of the yellow paper. That is what the Buddha is aware of. The Buddha is aware of the white paper, and the Buddha is aware of the appearance of a yellow paper.
통하기 제시로 딜도 아니 디차시에 있는 라나다 야나 섭두주로 기지시나다 같이 숨요래다 바게나 군제의 명원도 진 숨요래 숨요바는 세상계의 숨시래 하이 능수요 원도 진이 추 미능수요 원 가사 뒤지 미능수요 원도 진이 추 이다이 능수 현황이 권의 시온도 숨시래 다 디숨디 현나나 요거네래 사지 권의 대가 가르시기래서는 시기마리 기지 딜레사 that the model kiji shedo to tagila di model tata ring to slaiba karesana nge kado di chashi yimin ki nyobadi sang masabadu pedi tone tishi jami do ta kado di chashi yimbada tizuke je ta chena ani chulona ta na shinchi ne ani chibuchi nge ta tishi chibuchi ki rujurta.
So with respect to the uncommon kind of appearance, having a unique kind of view of something, as in like an uncommon perception of something, so here the example we used was that of one phenomenon that is perceived differently by a human being, a celestial being, and a preta being, so taking this vessel of liquid. So everyone has their unique kind of perception of that object. So we say here, therefore, that as a part of this vessel, there is a part of the vessel, these three individual perceptions, so water and passing blood and so forth, they exist as parts of this vessel with liquid. Even you have a new part being newly established, a new kind of quality being newly established if someone perceives this vessel as being water, if someone perceives this newly. So all this works in this case of this example. We can say that there are these three different perceptions by three different beings, and the Buddha is aware of those. The Buddha is aware, the Buddha realizes water, the Buddha perceives water, the Buddha perceives passing blood, and the Buddha perceives nectar. So therefore, these three, so to a human being water, to a preta passing blood, and to a celestial being nectar, all those are other induced appearances, in the sense that whatever appears to those three different types of beings, therefore they also appear, they exist as qualities of that water, as that of that vessel of water, or the water in the vessel, and therefore they appear to the Buddha. But with color, it's more difficult, because until we decide whether color is a part of an object, whether it is part of an object, it is a part or a quality of an object, it is difficult to say whether there is such unique appearance that is different for everyone, and whether these three colors exist on the basis of that object. Until we decide that, we cannot really answer this.
다 카도디 줄로나타나 신시에나니 지부지장체네 수미에나 다 산지기 순가 시기레 사이언스 코란주 통주원의 제바를 산지 코란이 카도 가르시기레스나니 요마레 대가 다 줄로나타나 신진의 제레 매워이나 아니 미시자바도 지바레 딜 미시자니 뭐보통 미시세보자나 세보통 다디 산지기 아니 파게 나와디 시레마도 슈부세부시에메바 슈부세부 요마.
So with respect to the color, therefore, if we were to be able to decide that with regard to the color, that this is a part of the object, and so three different people would perceive a different color as being part of that object, then the Buddha would perceive all those in the same way as you have the perception by perception of a vessel, one perceiving it as nectar and so forth. In the same way, the Buddha would perceive these three colors. And there would be other induced appearances. They would be perceived by the Buddha by way of appearing to those three different beings. There would not be a straightforward perception of these three colors, but only in that indirect fashion. So in the case of, for example, looking at a white piece of paper and you put on shades, you put on yellow-colored shades, you put on red-colored shades. So then these are not the colors of the paper. So when the paper appears as yellow, the paper appears as red. So in that case, what would appear to the Buddha is not a yellow paper or a red paper, but rather what the Buddha would be aware of would be the appearance of the yellow paper. The Buddha would be aware of the appearance of the red paper.
컨디셔야 돼 가지나 하다 땡겨불라 안에 전남 덴바데 밀로와이 군소부처 탐제 루와이 이네 쇼나나야 가사 레 균제데 루와이 밀로와이바 아니 세부신의 송아데 이니 겐도 마르베스 안에 대잠도 마세야 레 균제디기 전남 기본도 제네야 내가 차도로 마르베스.
So the question here was asked that according to the Prasangika school, we talk about conventional truth being deceptive and ultimate truth being non-deceptive. So, but it is clear that the law of causality, the law of karma, is described as non-deceptive. So the law of karma is that not non-deceptive. And then also in relation to the ultimate truth, so with regard to the ultimate truth, does karma and the cause and conditions and so forth, are they not totally non-existent? So with regard to the question, reformulated it slightly to translate the way I formulated it. Like Geshe-la's response is that when we talk about the law of karma, so cause and effect being non-deceptive, that is just from the perspective of saying that if one accumulates a harmful cause, the result will be suffering. If one accumulates a virtuous cause or a beneficial cause, the result will be happiness. So therefore, it's infallible, therefore the infallibility or the non-deceptiveness is merely from that point of view. So stressing the infallibility of karma here